So the first talk, which is a nominee talk, will be from Theodora Hamilton-Holbrook, Animal or Machine, Neuromodulated Emotion and their Effect on Affinity. Please give her a warm applause to start her talk.
So within our project, the main focus we wanted to look at was developing a unique system which had the ability to mesh this gap between HRI and neuromodulated systems, aiming to, in the end, hopefully have behavior which indicated that of a dog in the truest of sense. So to jump right into it, we created a novel robotic system named Hazel, which was based upon an animatronic-esque zoomorphic robotic system. So we created a system with 16 degrees of freedom, able to articulate parts such as eye pitch, eyelids, its tongue, its jaw, its ears. This allowed us to create unique behaviors such as panting, winking, blinking, or looking to the side like a dog would when they're guilty. On top of this, we created a type of organic interface. So we used different types of artistic materials such as foam, clay, wool, to really emulate the types of feelings and tactility that you'd get when interacting with a dog. So for example, the gums were squishy, so kids could go up and touch them and kind of feel it, and the ears were soft. This allowed us to have a better system to be able to embed neuromodulated hormonal systems into. So we focused upon the look of the HPA axis within this robotic system. We wanted to take the innate response of fear, reward, to be able to try and create a system which was able to respond in a temporal manner, as well as a similarity close to that of a dog. So as you can see, we took the different kinds of key facial expressions you'd see from a dog, such as happiness, neutral, fear, anger, discomfort. And we took these baselines for different kinds of facial expressions. So for example, with happiness, the mouth being open, the tongue being out, the ears being up. Or with anger, how the ears go all the way back, they start snarling and baring their teeth. We wanted to take this and implement it into the highlighted section of the HPA axis, which you can see on the right, to try and create a system that's able to respond in a temporally appropriate manner, whilst also creating these types of unique emotions. This leads on to our integration. So we took 4 key hormones, that being adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine, as well as ACTH. These all were modulated by 2 different forms of valence, one for a positive, one for a negative. So on the left, you can see the different types of hormone graphs and the way that those ended up responding within a given interaction sequence to a positive and negative stimuli. We were able to create the different emotions you can see highlighted in the different appropriate colors, such as blue for a neutral response, or the purples for different forms of excitement with different levels depending on how much proximity that the dog had to the different objects. On top of that, we were able to create dynamic anger responses, for example, forms of barking when in motion within different kinds of interaction sequences. If not, it would have a type of teeth chattering that you'd see maybe from more smaller dogs. We were able to implement this with the system seen on the left, which took 2 different approaches. One, attempting to map it in a similar manner to that of the HPA axis, and the secondary showing things such as different kinds of responses and the way they'd affect those emotions, as highlighted in the larger black square underneath. So this brings us to our hypothesis, mainly focusing around the idea of the Uncanny Valley. So the Uncanny Valley is a very well-established trait within HRI. However, despite the research we've done into things such as humanoids, there's very few markers when it comes to zoomorphic effects. We have a stuffed animal, but nothing if something's moving. And I mean, as things like such quadrupeds become more and more regularly used within robotics, surely this is something we need to start to assess. So we've taken a look of seeing if we're able to create a robotic system able to overcome this Uncanny Valley within certain age ranges where critical reasoning has not yet fully developed, as well as matching it to the types of likeness which we can see in previous things, such as experiments on within likability of different forms of robotic systems. Are we able to create a unique robotic system that children who do not have full critical reasoning are able to develop true affinity with? Are they able to really see it and perceive it as a friend, as a pet? So this moves on to our experiment setting. We had over 100 children at our experiment, split into 4 groups. So we had 2 groups of children between the ages of 9 to 10, and 2 between the ages of 10 to 11. Within this experiment, they were shown a short interaction sequence, where they were shown the dog's responses to things such as a ball, the ball being taken away, being shouted at, and then repercussions of being shouted at. These children then had the opportunity to express and interact and tell us what emotions they thought they perceived, what behaviors they thought they saw, their different opinions about the interactions they were having, and then had about 10 minutes to properly interact, touch, feel, and ask any questions they wanted to about the dog. From this, we were able to get quite clear results in regard to that age split over critical reasoning. As critical reasoning typically emerges around the age of 10, you can see on the left we've got that older group, where the perception between perceived and actual emotion starts to become quite blurred, especially when it comes to more complex secondary emotions such as anger, fear, possessiveness, things which require more minute understanding or more personability to understand. Whereas with the younger children, where that critical reasoning hasn't fully set in yet, the line is clear. The children were very, very willing and able to accept and understand the different emotions which were occurring with very few points of error around, again, the same complex emotions. That also may be due to the fact that we had some split by school years, so there's a good chance there were some children who maybe started to catch on a little bit earlier. On top of that, we also mapped the way the children interacted with the dogs. The places they touched them, the places they felt, the places and areas which they may have pulled things out or damaged parts of the robot. That's mapped on the heat graph on the left. On the top, you can see it with younger children. They choose to pet the dog in areas you stereotypically pet a dog. Behind its ears, under its chin, on its side. Some of them even squeezing its paw and petting its paw or touching the paw pads underneath. With the older children, we saw the complete switch. We had children putting their hands in the dog's mouth, pulling teeth out, putting their fingers in its eyes. And when they did that, they'd ask the answer of, can I? And we gave them the ability to. And the older children had full confidence that if they put their hand in its mouth, it wasn't going to bite them. They knew it was a robot. They understood it was a robot. They were willing to perceive it as a robot. So this leads on to our results. The idea of the suspension of disbelief and the evaluation of preconceived expectations. Within younger children, we have this concept of prima facie. Prima facie in simplicity is the, if it walks like a duck and acts like a duck, it is a duck concept. We take advantage of this to try and create a system which is able to fully interact and respond to the things around it in a convincing enough manner to trick people. Now, with the younger children, this was quite strong. They were willing to overcome their link to the Uncanny Valley and accept that it was a dog. Even though some children would question it and would go, oh, there's a camera, or oh, I can see the joints, they were still willing to treat and perceive it that of a dog. We got a lot of keywords which were coming out within that discussion, such as they wanted to play with it, or they saw it as a friend. And most of the responses we got were positive interactions. This leads us to our overall judgment of affinity with it, which is that the younger children were so convinced it was a dog, they were willing to put on secondary notions onto it. The concept of, we asked them if they wanted to take it home, and many kids went, I don't want to take it home, my dog would get jealous. I'd be playing with them, not this. So these children were so willing to accept it as what it was that they were willing to put on those kinds of secondary relationships and tertiary relationships to the family-based setting. On top of that, the children who would take it home had a really interesting response when it came to questions asked about food. We'd ask them, what would you feed it? We get the answers of dog food, steak, treats. Now with the older children, we see quite an interesting switch. While the concept of prima facie was so prevalent within some children, many immediately started to point out aspects of the robot. As this was all mounted onto a Unitree Go2, it's quite a common robot nowadays. Quite a few children may have seen it online before. So we had a lot of children pointing at it and going, that's a part of a robot, that's a joint. Where's the camera? Since they'd seen these ideas, they were looking for the grounding features of the robot underneath. So this Uncanny Valley link is really, truly quite strong with these older children. We get some of the key identifying words of uncomfortability. It's weird, it's creepy, it's strange. On top of that, we also get kids who are less scared of it. So we had a few children who were scared of dogs trying to interact with it, and they didn't have that same fear factor they had with dogs, as they understood somebody was controlling it. They had the comfortability in knowing that it was on a leash, essentially. This gave us our overall affinity response of, despite the fact that they see it's a dog, and they understand what we're trying to get them to believe, they still groundedly believe it is a robot. Even when we went to the extent of explaining to them what kind of emotions and how those emotional processes are used, such as explaining the idea of it feels fear the same way you and I do, the kids would accept that, but not much else past that. They refused to believe the fact that we hadn't necessarily programmed these emotions, and they were more emergent based upon previous experiences as well. So this leads into basically our further work, which we end up trying to do with the system. We have the end goal of creating a system with full hormonal control along the HPA axis. So within some recent work, hopefully coming out soon, we are looking at creating a full 9-hormone system, being able to integrate this into different forms of the Uncanny Valley as well. So for example, taking 2 different appearances, modulating the way it looks and the way that it acts, depending on how different children respond. Do they prefer a cartoonish appearance, like the one you see here, or a more realistic one, like we see in Hazel? So it really gives us the ability to test that zoomorphic line, hoping to make that new marker on the Uncanny Valley, while still applying to the different types of reasoning and understanding that children may have at different levels, making a system applicable to anybody who'd like to interact with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's some question over there.
Hey, great presentation, super nice work. I was just curious about your personal opinion about, would it be better for us to go closer to the Uncanny Valley, like to have a more, realistic dog as you proposed, or maybe going more towards Aibo, that back in the days it was a huge success. Everybody was like hype and it was clearly not a realistic dog, but everybody felt more attached to it.
So this is my proposition, is the fact of when it comes to people who are generally speaking older than 18, let's say, things like Aibo become more appealing because we have a very grounded sense of the Uncanny Valley. We see something, we know we don't like it. With younger children, they don't have that as much, so I'm hoping to have that kind of application where you can have kids who are more willing to be more personable with it because it looks more realistic. So, for example, some children who may have temperament issues, they'd be willing to not hit it or not interact with it badly or not pull its teeth out because it looks like a dog. And because they have that understanding, if it looks like a dog, I don't want to hurt it. So we had a few kids who were able to understand to stroke it softly because it was dog, but when we had, let's say, a disembodied head, they were very happy to pull parts out of it. So I think it depends on the age range you're looking at, as well as the type of interaction sequence you're looking at. For day-to-day use, I think it depends on the person over a certain age range.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. What I would like to ask is that in the paper you said that the 86% of the children had familiarity with robots, which I think, yes, it's a strong indicator. I just wanted to ask, have you also investigated the familiarity of having dogs or at home or being with dogs is a crucial outcome for for your analysis?
So actually in the further leading on study we did from this about 3 months later, which is the one pictured here, we did have that, and we had that major question of formalized, do you have a dog, do you like dogs? We didn't see much difference in all reality, apart from strong dislike towards dogs and strong hatred towards dogs. All children had roughly the same amount of interactionness and willingness to interact with it, since it was a very common, well-understood interaction sequence they'd see on TV, for example. Give the dog a ball, give the dog a treat, shout at the dog. It was quite basic for them to understand, so there wasn't much of a difference. With children who strongly disliked dogs, there was a much stronger coming around curve, but we still managed to get, I think, 4 children who didn't want to go anywhere near it in the beginning to come within its personal space and be willing to bridge that gap. So there is some effect, but I don't think it's as significant as one would perceive it to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was just wondering whether you think that this is a temporary effect, that maybe they were poking its eyes and trying all sorts of weird things because they were testing whether it's a real dog or not, but once they're clear on the fact that it's not, they still might benefit from the advantages of having that dog in the classroom, for example, because there is evidence to show that companion dogs, if they're in the classroom, children read better or more, or timid children are willing to read in front of others. So do you think, in spite of that temporary effect, children still then just continue and go ahead and interact with it or benefit from its presence?
So it's interesting you actually mentioned that, again, not to bring this back up, but in this follow-on study we did, we actually went to a school which had a therapy dog there already. And those children were able to interact for a much longer time, so a 30-minute period. And that kind of poking and pulling actually only got worse over time with the older children because they then understood it was a robot, so they'd start moving its legs out of alignment or they'd start trying to pull bits of its suit off that we had. So it's got a zipper on the back. They try pulling that zipper out, trying to pull at different components. When we asked them, would you want to do the same job as your therapy dog, they all went, I don't know, because they think it'd be cool to have a robot, but they don't want it to be a dog. So the older kids is actually a weird kind of dichotomy we need to look more at to see whether we can bridge the Uncanny Valley enough for them to be comfortable with it being there, or is it truly a thing of it sets in, they go, absolutely not, I'm going nowhere near this thing.
Thank you very much. We will try to catch up the... So thank you again. Please give a warm applause.